Welcome back, everybody. This is Rodrigo Fonador with another episode of Asheville Real Estate News. Really excited to continue our coverage this week on the elections. And today I'm joined by Mr. Albert Wiley, who's running here in the Republican primaries. And so we're going to dive into why he got into it, what he's hoping to see, and what are the changes we can maybe expect on his platform. Without further ado, Mr. Wiley, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. I always find like it's a good starting place to talk about where home is and if home is here for you now, or when did you move to North Carolina? Because like a lot of people like me, I wasn't born and raised here, but I'm very happy and thankful to live here now.
Well, actually, I was born and raised just a few miles from here, Canton, and briefly in Forest City, but the first 16 years of my life I lived in Canton, which is only 10 miles from here. And, of course, got to know Asheville quite well during that period. I went to North Carolina State University, took a nuclear engineering degree. Worked as an engineer for a while until I got enough money to go to medical school, and went to medical school and ended up with all over the country getting training at Stanford, University of Wisconsin, MD Anderson in Houston.
Wow.
And then I went into the Navy a few years and got called in during Vietnam. And when I got out, I went to the University of Wisconsin. It was the best job I could get doing what I wanted to do there. I'm a cancer specialist.
Okay.
An oncologist, cancer specialist, and practiced there for 23 years. Finally got an opportunity to come back to North Carolina. My parents and all my relatives, of course, were here. And actually most of them in this district, the 11th district, Rutherford, Haywood, Macon County. And so actually my situation right now, I was at East Carolina University as head of their cancer center for a number of years. And then I've retired, actually, officially.
Congratulations on the retirement and the hunt for being out of retirement.
But I'm not really retired because I took a job. I retired from full-time practice of medicine, but I took a job working for Department of Energy over in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, doing not oncology at all, but some kind of stuff I did in the Navy was training and preparing people to deal with nuclear contamination, Chernobyl, Fukushima.
Oh, wow.
That kind of thing. So I've been all around the world the last 10 years. I figured the other day I've been out of the country for a year and a half out of the last 10 years.
Wow.
Training people mostly at U.S. embassies and around the world, 25 countries or so.
Wow.
And
racked up those miles, huh?
So, yes, a lot of frequent flyer miles.
And now you're back here then, I guess. So.
Well, I ended up back in the eastern part of the state a few years ago because, again, where East Carolina is, because they asked me to cover several hospitals part-time. And
gotcha.
So I lived there to cover these hospitals as a part-time job. And so I do have a home there, but I've had a home in Rutherford County for 25 years, which I attached to.
Right, and, of course.
So officially I am a resident of a county down east, but
home is where the heart is, and the heart's in Rutherford.
The heart has always been in the mountains. If I got elected to this job, I'd be up here in a flash at my home in Rutherford County.
Gotcha. Yes, sir. Well, let's talk about that. So you obviously don't need to do this, right? Because you've got good opportunities that you've been pursuing. So what happened for you to decide to take this leap and highly contested primary as far as, the amount of candidates, and kind of is happening pretty quick. So what happened? When did you make your decision, and why did you make your decision?
Well, as you know, all of us made a decision pretty quick.
Yeah.
I'd been following Congressman Meadows, of course. I follow what goes on in this district closely with my relatives. And I had actually thought about running for his seat some years ago because I do some part-time work at several hospitals in this district also, from Murphy and Silva area.
Okay.
And actually lived in Franklin for a little while, not too long ago. And so I'm very interested in what's going on in the district. It's my home district, and I want to see people do well, and I want to see good things happen here. And when this opportunity came up, it was over. I literally had, like everybody, about 24 hours to think about it. And in fact, I think I was the last person, I'm quite sure I was, to sign up in Raleigh. I got there 1 minute before they closed the door.
Oh, wow.
And at that time, honestly, I only thought there would be 3, maybe 4 candidates based on what I'd seen in the news.
I think we're at 9, right?
What I'd seen in the newspapers.
Yeah.
No, it ended up being 12.
Is it 12?
9 filed the last day.
Okay, yeah.
And that was not on what I had been looking at. So I'm not so sure I would have gotten into it had I known there would be so many candidates.
It creates for a little bit of noise, doesn't it?
I'm sorry?
It creates for a little bit of noise as far as like...
Well, it's going to be kind of confusing to the voters, I think. I've actually run for Congress before. And when I was at the University of Wisconsin back in the late 80s, I had been in the faculty senate, and people liked what I was saying about the future of biotechnology in Wisconsin as job opportunities. Right. And the Republican Party asked me to run for the seat there. I ran, and President Reagan strongly endorsed me, and I thought I had a good chance, but I was up against a 30-year incumbent, and I lost.
Yeah, well, 30 years, that's a big battle to get over there.
Yeah, he had more money than I could think of, and it was so anyway, I have tried for Congress several times, and I know when it gets very crowded, it's hard for the public to know much about people.
Yeah, it's a little bit challenging when there's so much information because it's hard to sift through it all. And I know for me, preparing for these interviews and kind of reaching out to everybody, it's a little daunting. Like, it's easy to just kind of be like, I'm just going to wait until after the primaries and then, get involved or focused. And it's probably not the best decision, but it's not easy. It's not hard to get there just because of you're like, where do I start? Who do I read about? There's a lot out there. Well, let's go 2 things. So curious to know what your experience is that you can draw on from before, since you've ran before, and are you doing anything different this campaign than in the past, I guess? That's the question.
Yes. For one thing, when I ran and President Reagan endorsed me back in the 80s, I ran and had funding through the Republican Party.
Right.
Now I am self-funding, and I have run for several other primaries, and I've always self-funded myself in the primary, which I'm doing this time also. If I win the primary, then I'd have to get support from other people. But I've always felt that before I ask people to invest in my potential, that I ought to kind of prove myself, and so I do self-fund again. And what I routinely do is just meet as many people as I can, take advantage of any opportunities I can, like the one you offer, which I think is a good public service for you to do this. And see what happens.
Absolutely. Well, what's the differentiating factor between you and everybody else in the field? How would you cut through the noise?
Well, I would say my life experience, I'm a lot older than most of the candidates, and I've had a long life experience in a variety of ways, engineering and medicine primarily, and biotechnology. I was a scientist essentially for a number of years at the University of Wisconsin. I had a PhD in biotechnology area also, in addition to my MD. And so I learned how to work with, and also the Navy. I directed a very large laboratory, nuclear defense lab for the Navy when I was in the Navy. I've directed Cancer Center at ECU, associate director at Wisconsin. So I've worked for the federal government. Mentioned this work I'm doing for the Department of Energy. And so I have experience working with almost every government agency in the last 10 years. Congress, I've been a subject matter expert on Senator Lieberman's Homeland Security Committee. So I've had relatives in Congress. That's one of the things that's kind of, I should say, about politics. I always wanted to be a physician as a vocation. But I grew up in the days of Eisenhower, who said he thought that politics in this country should be every citizen's avocation. That is their hobby.
Right. Yeah, their passion project, per se.
Yeah. And so I've had many relatives on my mother's side of the family from Rutherford County and from my dad's side, Macon County. Politics was always important to me. But medicine always came first. But now that I have the recent years, I have some time and I have some money to invest in it. I do it as an avocation, and I believe that the system works better when we have people who come in having had a life experience that they can try to make things better in government committees, oversight, things like that, because they have a life experience dealing with things like medicine and nuclear power plants and things like that.
They've got context to draw from, right?
You have information and facts and experience to know what works and what doesn't work. And as I say, I've learned quite a bit the last 10 years about how government works.
Has that been disheartening or encouraging?
Both. I think there are things that need to be improved, absolutely, in government. There's a lot of waste, and I think poor decisions are often made, especially in oversight committees when they do the funding and so forth, because the congressmen, most of them are lawyers and bankers, people like that, and they really don't understand technology. And I think there's some mistakes that cost us a lot of money simply because, and that they'll say, oh, well, we'll get a lobbyist to tell me all about this, and you will, but I can get a lobbyist to tell me almost anything I want to hear.
Yeah.
But I think from a point of view of factually understanding technology, I would have a big advantage in Congress and could be of help to this district because of that.
Yeah, that I can definitely see that being the case. So obviously, this is a real estate podcast, and Nolan and I were just talking about this, and he produces it, just talking about like what the little things are.
I am sorry.
Oh, no worries.
Okay.
But just like once you have gone through and done enough deals or enough opportunities, and you've worked through enough situations, that it helps. It gives you things to draw on to make other decisions easier, just because you're not being surprised by the situation at hand or the variables or the questions you're getting asked at. And so, drawing on the life experience, I can imagine would be super, super beneficial for that.
Yeah, I've had over 40 years experience in taking care of patients
Yep.
with cancer,
Mm-hmm.
and you learn things that you won't learn any other way about what works, what doesn't
Right.
work, how the system works. So I think I could be of help, especially in medical issues
Yeah.
and some engineering like nuclear power plants, things like that.
So what if I was going to describe who you were or what your platform's about to my wife or to my friend or anybody, and be able to deliver a concise, sentence or two to explain the essence of who you are and why you're running, what would I say?
Well, people are interested in a lot of, let me preface it with this. People are interested, I know, in having congresspersons to do a variety of things. I think each person has their own idea of what a congressperson should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, one of the things is what are your world views on things. I am a conservative.
Mm-hmm.
I've been that way all my life. I believe in responsibility and that people should be held responsible for things. And I believe in the law.
Mm-hmm.
People should obey the law. I'm personally of the Judeo-Christian persuasion.
Mm-hmm.
I believe strongly in that, and that is what has made our country great.
Mm-hmm.
So from that point of view, I would say, as I mentioned, Ronald Reagan
Mm-hmm.
endorsed me. I would say I'm a Reagan, now Trump conservative.
Understood. What do you think is the most important issue that you're running on? Or if somebody would say, if you were able to get one thing accomplished, what would it be that you'd want to hang your hat on?
Well, there's so many things to work on. It's kind of hard to say for sure.
I know.
But
or one or two things, but just like to try to.
Yeah.
I think because at least maybe personally speaking, just sometimes it feels like it's so daunting. Like, where do you even begin? So.
Well,
where do you begin then might be the better question instead of where you finish.
In general, not always, but in general, I would vote to try to help President Trump firmly establish his agenda for this country, which I think he's trying to, in the long run, help develop a middle class again.
Mm-hmm.
There's been too much separation between the rich and the poor, and I think he's trying to help develop a middle class, which will work best in our type of government, I think, to have a strong middle class. So I would vote for his agenda in general. And
is there?
I'm sorry.
I was going to say you said you'd vote for his agenda in general. I was just wondering, is there anything right off the bat that you see you feel like you see differently or?
I am an independent thinking person also. I'm a conservative, but I'm an independent.
Yeah.
I really am an independent thinker, and I would like to see. I'm very concerned about environmental issues. I'm a cancer specialist, and I always say the best way to deal with cancer is to prevent it, and we want to keep clean water. We want to keep clean air, and this is my beautiful Western North Carolina homeland.
Yeah.
I've fished every trout stream you can think of around here as a kid, and mostly around Coal Mountain, and it's beautiful country, and I want to see it kept that way and to do any. So I may differ on those types of issues somewhat.
Yeah, it's.
I don't want to see toxins in water, in our drinking water especially.
Yeah, it'd be like, I know one of the main reasons I've stayed here is chose to move here is because it's so beautiful, and like being outside is so accessible, and it really would be sad for that to change. It's kind of really unique part of the fabric here, I would say. So
I think it attracts most people.
Yeah.
Most people have a deep need for
connecting to
wilderness
nature.
areas and
Absolutely.
that kind of environment.
As you've been on the campaign trail, have you felt like there's been a common question that you've been asked or a common sentiment that you've been picking up from people that they feel like needs to be addressed or that there's people are unsettled about?
Well, the economy is good and the jobs are more than they have been in many years for everybody, it seems like.
Yep.
But there's still not enough. This area could use some more higher paying jobs for skilled labor, people like that. And I would like to, and I get that comment quite a bit, there's talks about jobs, but North Carolina still hasn't recovered from the textile and furniture exodus that came about with
NAFTA.
The NAFTA. As Ross Perot said, there will be a drain of jobs. He was exactly right. And those are the kinds of skilled labor jobs I'd like to, and I think I mentioned biotechnology earlier. When I ran before in Congress in Wisconsin, that was my big issue, was to try to establish opportunities for people to establish biotechnology jobs because they're generally high-paying and stable jobs once they're established, and they require a lot of skilled labor. I know when I was at East Carolina University, I helped to set up with Pitt Community College a training program for training people for these types of industries, and it works. And so I have ideas about how to work with regional colleges and community colleges, private colleges, to help establish a good workforce, which is the main thing for attracting these types of jobs.
Yeah, well, so many things to tackle. Best of luck as you go on to tackle them. What is the best way for people to get connected with you? When you work your way through the primary, how do people support you? Yeah, how do people find out more if they've listened to this conversation and they like what you've said and it resonates with them?
Well, they can write me. My private email address is aljan, that's my wife's name, Wiley, W-I-L-E-Y, aljanwiley at AOL.com. I'd be happy to correspond with people if they want to contact me that way. If you want more information about me, there is a lot of material. If you just search my name, Dr. Albert Wiley, and if you put the word candidate on there, you'll get more specific information. And a lot of information will show up there.
Absolutely. Any parting words, maybe something that we didn't touch on, maybe a question that I didn't ask that you would have liked to have had the opportunity to ask? This is your moment to express whatever we might not have touched on already.
Well, I know that my age is maybe a concern for some people. I'll just say a few years ago, I was training people at the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, Iraq, running around with 40 to 50 pounds of armor. And so I'm still in good shape. And I'd like to serve 2 or 3 terms. I believe in term limits. And that's what I'd like to do. So I'm sure I could do that job. And I believe I could do a very good job for the people of this district. I love this district and its people. And it would be a real privilege to have that opportunity.
Yeah, well, appreciate it, Mr. Wiley. Thanks so much for joining us on the show today. Guys, if you missed the email, we'll have it in the show notes so you guys can go back and take a look and write and correspond super easily. If this conversation resonated with you, if you think somebody else might be interested in what Mr. Wiley here has got to say with us, then by all means, please share this with your friends, tag it, and let us know. And if you have questions, reach out to Mr. Wiley directly. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and stay tuned as we work through a couple other interviews with everybody else who's running this primary season. Most importantly, don't forget to vote. Take care, you guys. See you on the next one.
Thank you.